story we're going to talk about is a story that I said I was going to put out on Friday, but I came across some new information. Now, when I say new information, I mean just another wacky theory, but I wanted to watch some videos on it to see if I was like, well, I'll check if there's any merit to it. This is the story of the Paleolithic deep state. Now, we've talked before about the conspiracy theory iceberg. And it's a quick overview. It's just a picture of an iceberg, and it lists conspiracy theories from the most well-known to the most obscure. Doesn't mean the ones at the bottom are more true. It doesn't even mean the ones at the bottom are more interesting. It just means they're lesser known. A very common one people ask about is the plane of jars. It's like halfway down the chart. It's boring. I looked it up. I was like, that's it? That's lame. So, I mean, just because it's low on the chart doesn't necessarily mean that it's spooky. Plane of Jars is just a big field full of jars that some people built. That's it. I was like, that was a waste of my time researching that. But deep down on the list is the Paleolithic deep state, and then in parentheses it says the caveman theory. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of facts about Paleolithic people. It's not as much as I need to, but I'll need to give you some to set this up. And that's code word for saying I didn't write any of that stuff down when I was doing my research. But I wrote a bunch of articles about Paleolithic people, and you science nerds can tell me how right or wrong I am. The Paleolithic era was basically the time when humans were hunter-gatherers. We were banding up in large groups. So as humanity was leaving Africa, they were starting to form bigger groups. And you would have basically family groups. You'd have your family, and then that would be part of a band sort of thing. So you'd have maybe 20 families together. And then those 20 families may also be connected to an even bigger group, which would be the equivalent of a city or a nation. This is when they started doing cave paintings. This is when they started communicating with each other. This is when you started to see the beginning of a society. It was a hunter-gatherer society. So they would basically go into an area, exploit it, and then move on. But as the Paleolithic era continued, they started thinking, let's not exploit this area. This is a good area. Let's only fish so much. But anyway, so a little history lesson. I'm going to get off this real quick But the Paleolithic era, you saw the start of religion, you saw the start of communication, you saw the start of art, and there's still a lot of debate over whether the art is some sort of symbol or if it was just people being bored and saying, I'm going to draw a picture of an ox. That's the Paleolithic era. It was about 50,000 years ago. Now, there was a couple obstacles to what was going on there, because you saw people coming out of Africa and they're like, okay, this world's huge. Let's do all this stuff. Bunch of stuff. There's chickens and berries everywhere over here. They started to run into other groups, and that's where you had the Neanderthals come in. So the Neanderthals were basically stronger. They've always been considered kind of stupider than humans, but they actually, we found burial sites for them as well. So we believe that the Neanderthals believed in life after death. We believe that the Neanderthals had some sort of social system, but basically the Homo sapiens were able to outthink the Neanderthals. But as Homo sapiens were leaving Africa, they started to populate parts of Asia and parts of other. That's kind of all that was there right then. But when they went into Europe, they got held back. We can see Homo sapien development up to a certain point in one area, and then it takes a while before we can see evidence of Homo sapiens in Europe. And one of the theories, it's because the Neanderthals held them at bay for 10,000 years. They weren't able to press past the Neanderthals for whatever reason. Either they were just stronger or they were way smarter than we thought they were. One of the theories is they were just better suited for the cold weather. So when the Homo sapiens got there, they're like, what is this white stuff falling on me? This totally sucks. And the Neanderthals are like, ho, 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 ho. And then eventually the Homo sapiens did go up there. So that was kind of the end of the Neanderthals. The Homo sapiens conquered the planet. And then we moved from Paleolithic era to Stone Age. And I think Paleolithic era and Stone Age are kind of together. But again, so we weren't just drooling idiots as a species, but we weren't as awesome as we are today. That's Paleolithic era in a nutshell. So here's the theories. Here's the theories that go along with that. Now, two of the theories are pretty racist. And I want to say that right off the bat because I've talked about it before on my show. I don't subscribe to any sort of. I think that the notion, you can agree with me or disagree with me. It doesn't matter to me. But I don't subscribe to ideas of racial superiority or racial inferiority. But I just wanted to get into that because the next two theories we're going to talk about, I have a theory of what the phrase actually means. I have a theory of what it actually means, but we're going to go into the two other theories of what it means. And so the first theory is this. It's that Homo sapiens pressed into Europe, the Neanderthals stopped them. Eventually, though, the Homo sapiens started to make great inroads. We're wiping out the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals said, we have to go underground. Not literally, even though we live in caves. Don't do that, Krog. Come back here. He's like walking back out of the cave. We have to go underground. We're going to interbreed with these people. We're going to look like them. And we're secretly going to control them from behind the scenes. And here's the racist part. Those Neanderthals are modern-day Jewish people. Now, to state the obvious, I personally do not believe that Jewish people are Neanderthals. However, some people do. What I don't understand, what's one of the things I don't understand about racism is that Neanderthals, like the previous description, they're way stronger than normal humans. And super immense monkey strength is not something that is generally a stereotype of a Jewish person. So the thing with they'll be like, a racist will be reading something like this and say, oh my god, another species fought for dominance and possibly went underground, just like the Jews control us from behind the scenes, and they forget every other possible fact that could dispute that. So they forget every other fact. But anyway, so that's one of the conspiracy theories that I stumbled across, and I was like, okay, that's just not true. It doesn't make any sense. But again, as a stereotype, even Jewish people in Northern Europe are not known for being massively strong. So that was a racist theory. And you go, well, Jason, you said there was two of them. Well, yep, here's the second one. So this was the series of videos I found the other day. This one has a little bit more credibility than the last one, which is to say almost still no credibility. The only reason why I think it has a tiny shred of credibility is because you can't find any information on it. And there's a YouTube series that only every other episode is up. It's constantly being deleted, and the channels that it's on has like 19 views, no subscribers. It's really bizarre. But it is a stupid theory, so it kind of makes sense. Humanity did start in Africa. Neanderthals were up north. As the humans started to leave Africa, they ran into the Neanderthals and were assaulted and forced to interbreed and faced huge troubles. And the humans said, you know what, we're just going to kind of stick around here where we're at. And the Neanderthals were like, ho, 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 we won. And then over the next 10,000 years, the Neanderthals became white people. And so this is a racist conspiracy theory as well. There is within a subset of the African American community, you will hear the term caveman used as a derogatory term for a white person. That white people, generally, a lot of people on the planet have at least 4% Neanderthal DNA in them, between 1% and 4%. However, we don't see those numbers very much in Africa or in native populations in South America and North America and things like that. The Neanderthal blood is predominantly in Europe and parts of Asia, which would make sense because you had this huge empire of Neanderthals interbreeding over thousands of years. So the people who have no Neanderthal blood in them are the only purebred humans. They are 100% Homo sapien. Everyone else is partially a beast, is subhuman. Only the native people and the Africans are true humans. And the problem is that white people run the world, and they're subjugating the true humans to put them down because they're human, because they're not these monstrous creatures. And that is the caveman theory. That is caveman in the Illuminati. I'll have a couple links in my show notes, a couple of these videos, because they're very hard to find. It's just nonsense. It's a lot of Illuminati rantings and a lot of racism against white people, a little bit towards Asians. But yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things that I think that theory is probably the reason why it's on the conspiracy theory iceberg. Because it's super, super obscure. The theory about the Neanderthals having Jewish lineage, I've been hearing that for a long time. Because, listen, racists are going to use any tool in their handbook to disparage the people they don't like. Whether it's white people are Neanderthals or Jewish people are Neanderthals, whatever. They'll grab on any piece of information they can to throw it in someone's face. But I think the reason why it's on the iceberg is because of the theory that only Africans and natives are true humans. Because it's such a deep-cut conspiracy. I've never heard that before. And all you can really do is track down a couple of these videos And it kind of states that case. So it is a low-level conspiracy theory. However, I have a theory of what it actually is. So I've been doing all this research, and this is going to get weird, but it explains a lot. And again, I'll say this. I have no proof to back this up. Nothing. Just a hunch. So when I was doing all this research on the Paleolithic era, and I always thought Paleolithic era was even farther back, caveman stuff. And this was, like I said, this is where societies were being created. That you started having, like I said, you started having these family units band up with these other family units, and then you started having bigger tribes, comparable to a less civilized version of like a Native American tribe. They weren't so much into rituals and stuff like that, but they did have their rituals, they did have their societies, they had rules. It was around 40, 50,000 years ago where we believe people started to develop the idea of moral outrage, of not just getting mad because, my food's gone, but getting mad because someone did something that they thought was wrong, praying to the wrong god or whatever. This is my theory, and it actually would explain a lot. My theory is this. As humanity was starting to band up into these groups, you would start to have people in these groups survey the land and survey the people and say, this can get better or this can get worse. And they're thinking on a high level. They're like, this way of life can be maintained, we can make it better, or it could get worse through other things. You had communication between these tribes, and especially as they poured out into the rest of the world. And you would have one leader to another leader say, this can get better or this can get worse. Like, we can go to war over these resources. We can work together, but we lose our identity as tribes and our different practices and things like that. This can get better or this can get worse. And as these groups of Homo sapiens continued moving out through the world, and they do encounter Neanderthals, and they do encounter these new elements that they've never ever really conceived of. I mean, who would have thought you'd run into another human, another species? These select leaders say, if we don't want to do anything, this will get worse. There's a whole world out here. There's all these gods. There's all this crazy stuff going on. And we can do nothing and just see what happens. Or we can direct the development of our species. Now, you say, well, Jason, that's kind of a high thought level for a bunch of cavemen. But they were basically human. They had self-awareness. They were making art for creative reasons. They were falling in love and getting mad and stuff like that. They were humans. They were humans at this point. And so you have these select leaders of these tribes get together and say, these are the stories that we are going to tell. These are the legends we are going to promote. These are the moral systems we are going to instill in our people. We are going to make this world a better place. The first Illuminati. The caveman Illuminati. The idea of a group of people, the deep state. You have everything running on top, and you'd have not elected, but you'd have your shaman and stuff like that in your individual tribes, but underneath it all, you'd have a secret ruling class who would say, incest is wrong. Who would say, don't defy the gods, because the gods would be the official messengers of their edicts. You would have them say, these are the rules. And I think that might actually explain why certain myths carry across cultures. We see stories like creation stories being very similar across cultures. We see dragons dragons across cultures of the Great Flood. That myth has come across different cultures, and people go, well, maybe there was dragons, maybe there was a flood. But stuff like the creation myth, we know the world wasn't cracked like an egg or 8 dragons came out or stuff like that. But when we look at creation myths across the world, there's a lot of similarities between them. And it would make sense that if a group of people said, whether or not you're with this band here in what will someday become Britain, or you're with that group there that will someday become Syria, we will communicate with each other. We will set up how we want our society, how our race to grow. I think that's possible. I have no proof of it, but When it popped in my head, I thought that things kind of fall into place that way. That's the Paleolithic deep state. It was a group of people making decisions for everybody else because they said, this is what we need to do to keep our society going so we don't get mashed out by the Neanderthals, or, some horrible curse doesn't befall our people, which, would be a plague or something like that. Let's set up these rules and let's deliver these messages and these moral stories across the board. I think it's weird that there are even stuff like, I understand incest because, your babies could get all weird, but there are certain, honor your elders. I mean, find a culture that hates their elderly people. So there are certain, you could say those are just basic human values, but what if those human values were just so ingrained on when we were first starting off as a species that, yes, they are human values now? Because if you didn't follow those values, you got shunned from the tribe. You weren't able to pass along your elderly hating genes. And I get not murdering people is the same pretty much across all cultures. There's subcultures that don't really care about it, but, like gangs. But stuff like respecting your elders is not something that has no benefit whatsoever, really, in the development of a species. You could go, well, the elderly people can teach us stuff. Well, yeah, so can, a book. But I'll still throw a book in the garbage. Respecting your elders is almost a universal thing. It's weird. Even stuff like cannibalism, which is very, very frowned upon in most cultures. So, was there a select group of Paleolithic hunter and gatherer tribal leaders who communicated and created the rules and the laws and the mores for humanity way back then? Did they tell those stories that we see mirrored over and over and over again in different cultures, that for the longest time we go, we don't know why people in South America have the same legend of people in Wales? It doesn't make sense. But maybe it's because of this Paleolithic deep state. They saw the world and said, we can get better or we can get worse, and they did their damnedest to make sure that humanity survived and that it got better. And if that theory is true, and again, last time I'm going to say it, I have no proof of it, just a hunch. Did they ever go away? Are the stories of the Illuminati, it's 1775 and Adam Weishaupt did it? That's just all total retcon. That since the first hut was built, since the first spear was thrown, there was a group of people silently directing the development of human life. Who knows? I know that if I had that power, I wouldn't necessarily give it up. Whether or not it was passed on to their next of kin or passed on to the wisest of the tribal leaders, we could never tell because it's probably just a fantasy of mine. But I think it fills in a lot of the blanks that I've had as far as world culture goes. But again, that being said, I'm sure anyone who actually knows anthropology could sit me down and say, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. And I'm fully open to being educated on the subject. But I just wanted to present to you the theory of Paleolithic deep state, and instead of just showing you two horrible looks at how racist people can be, I wanted to present a theory that I have an idea about that's more about hope and the fascinating aspects of history and human development. So let's get past all that racist nonsense. I know it's easier said than done, but we have to look at the world and say, do we want it to be better or do we want it to be worse? We're smarter than cavemen. Hey everyone, Jason from the future here. I was just editing the episode and I realized I left something important out of this story. This was a topic that a lot of people have been asking for. However, on YouTube, I had one specific user recommend it. I wanted to make sure I give him a shout out. Holly Coaris, I hope I'm pronouncing your tag right, or your name, your avatar, however it is. Holly Coaris hit me up on YouTube a while back and specifically asked for me to cover that story, and I just wanted to make sure that they got the credit for it, because I love you guys recommending stuff. It really gives me a good angle to go on. So thank you for the recommendation. Now we're going back to the episode. Doop. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.